Good morning, Matthew. I know we've already heard from you, Julie, but can you again take for the record your name?
John Matthew Phillips.
Can you go by Matt? Matt, can you please state who your parents were?
My father was Calvin Phillips. My mother was Pamela Phillips.
And we just heard about a little bit about Cal and Phillips, but I want to talk about Pam Phillips, your mother. Tell me and tell the jurors a little about her.
So my mother grew up in southern Alabama and northern Florida, so Pensacola, Eglin Air Force area. She went to high school, Niceville High School. She grew up with her two brothers and her mother. So it was a single mother environment for the most of her childhood. And shortly after high school, young adult, she met my father. Sorry. Do you want me to keep going on?
What was she like growing up?
For me growing up?
Yeah, growing up.
So my mother, I was born in the 80s. And so my father was in the military. So she was a military wife. She was a stay-at-home mom in my young adult childhood. And so she had started an early career at a bank, like a teller scenario into banking. And then she paused her work environment to raise me. She dealt with dad's deployments, which were long. My grandfather spoke about the first Gulf War. And so in that time for a military wife to try to keep everyone together and sane, that's a full-time job for people who are deploying, who have soldiers. And so from the time I was in elementary school at Pembroke Elementary, she was very involved in my just raising me, right? And then also her duties to keep military wives together and everything during those deployments. So to her to get a fairly energetic child to sit very still and force me to read at an early age was a task of hers that I think she diligently tended to. My mom was incredibly kind. She had a warmth about her that I think, biased as I may be, was very rare. And anyone that knew her just knew her as one of the sweetest people they'd ever known. And so I grew up in an environment where I knew I was loved, and that I knew that she wanted the best for me my entire life, and that she would do whatever she could as a mom to guide and just know that there was a foundation there. And I think that has been important throughout my entire life, because she stopped working and she stopped focusing on herself to give, and frankly, give energy and effort to me. And I think that really summarizes my mom. It did from whenever I was a child. And she carried that same energy and work ethic into her work at the bank. And whenever I graduated high school and went to college and was in my life, she pushed herself all the way into work. She was early to go and late to leave. She was dedicated. And I think that dedication is really how she spent her life. So whether it was on me or work or anything that she spent energy on, that's how she approached it. And I think that warmth with that dedication is a pretty special person. You heard some people, Penny Casey, speak about her, and that radiant warmth, I think really that captures her essence to me.
You mentioned it already, but you said she went back to work to focus on work for a while.
Yep.
Tell the jurors a little bit about her work at the bank.
So her focus was on keeping the bank safe. She was in compliance, and so there are banking regulations and rules and all the things that banks need to do to, not become into audit or have poor policies or what have you. Banking regulations change yearly, monthly, I don't often. And so my mother was a consummate student. She liked to learn. She could sit and just read and just absorb new information or find a new interesting, mundane as it may be to me for banking regulations. She was interested in making sure that that organization was safe. And I think that was a perfect job for her.
And the things that she did at the bank, did she then in turn give back to the community?
She did. She was very. She grew up in a single mother environment, and so she was very focused on financial literacy specifically for women. There is an addiction center for specifically young women in Hopkinsville, and so she spent time really focusing on financial literacy. And her idea, the concept and energy was spent that if people could make better choices, they could change their maybe next phase. She spent a lot of time thinking about that and spending energy in that. She also was a part of Leadership Hopkinsville, which I think is interesting because keep in mind, I knew my mom when I was small and then high school, and on. So she moved, in my eyes, from a stay-at-home mom to a vice president at a bank and then a community leader, right? So I was seeing her come into her own, right? And so she was active with Leadership Hopkinsville and financial literacy, and when she wasn't at the bank, she was giving.
And we touched on it a little bit, but how long were your parents married?
They married in 1981, so it would have been 34 years. They would be coming on 40 years as of now, together.
And when was her birthday?
Her birthday was November 20th, 1957.
November what?
November 20, 1957.
November 20th. And when was your parents' anniversary?
It was around the same time. I'm sorry,
Okay. And so, what was their marriage like growing up?
My parents were direct opposites. So my father was energetic and outgoing, and he wanted to see the world, and my mother was quiet and reserved. They didn't have the same humor. My father was loud, and my mother more giggle, reserved. My dad called her Miss Priss, and my dad was just boisterous and gregarious. So it was a perfect match to me. And watching them, I never saw really my parents argue or yell. I mean, everyone has disagreements. That's normal. But they just had a different pace. They didn't do that. My grandparents didn't do that. They got each other.
And Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Yes. At this point, I would like to move to introduce House Exhibit 238, 239, 237, and 238, excuse me. Previously shown at defense counsel.
And Judge, we don't have any objections to this.
All right. They'll be marked from there.
What's this picture, Matt?
That's my father and my mother and myself at, I believe, Pembroke Baptist Church, judging by the backdrop. They always used to have backdrops at the
Yeah.
yearly albums, what have you. So I would have been probably in elementary school at that point, I believe. I love this photo. There's another photo where I'm looking up, and that's just my childhood. That's how I grew up, with two people who love me unconditionally. I love that photo.
What's this picture, Matt?
My mom came to visit me. I bought my first house in Florida, and my mom came down, and she couldn't have been more excited. We took a week. She took off of work, and we just hung out. We walked to the beach. We went to the pier. We went to the house. We spent a whole week just mom and son, and it was new for me. I was new to the city at that time. Work had moved me there. And so we explored coffee shops and sandwich shops and just a whole week of time, which isn't easy, right, for everyone spread out and what have you. She was just happy for me that I was buying a house and being a young adult and living my life, which is what she spent so much of my early childhood to do, right?
Matt, I just have one more question. How has the loss of not just one, but both your parents, how has this affected you and your family?
My grandfather said the word devastation, and I can't, there's not really strong enough words to articulate. Your mind and body and soul explode, and everything changes. The way you view the world is different. And this loss, this just void where people used to be, people who were the most supportive, loving, kind, were taken, and they're just gone. And the concept of home, where you go for Thanksgiving or for Christmas or for just to go home, this concept of home has been taken. My parents loved that house, and I grew up in a wonderful little town. And it still feels like home, but there's this void that is it's just devastation, totality. And it's life altering for those of us who are still here and know that there is something that should be here that isn't. Two people and the love that they give, right? It's not just the person, but it's the whole of years that won't occur, or vacations that won't occur, Christmases or birthdays, or it's not only what the loss was, but what won't be. That is very palpable to us. Because it's stopped. It's gone.
Thank you, Matt.